Hey guys, it's Joel, and I just wanted to do a mental health quick bite for this morning. So the observation today is that we often marry or we try and date our shadow, that it's something that we know we need, but that we're not in touch with, and so we try and find it out here instead of integrating it in here, which is kind of the goal in a Jungian psychology. The shadow is all that information that we're kind of uncomfortable with in ourself and other people, sort of undealt with psychic material, so we repress it personally, and a lot of times we react to it externally. So, one of the ways that this comes out in relationships, like a ton of people come into therapy and they say, like, well, I just keep dating different versions of my dad or different versions of my mom. And, if that's happening, even though the people are different, you're attracted to a similar thing. And you're having kind of a relationship with that thing that is blinding you to stuff if those relationships are unhealthy, and they all tend to be unhealthy. So, what is it that you're trying to get out here? Is it validation? Is it that you need to fix something? It's generally some kind of role that you learn to play in a game in childhood. And that can be, it's my job to be wonderful and articulate and hardworking, and then go on and on about how hard I work, and then that is rewarded. When I'm burnt out and exhausted, people say, okay, good job. Or is it that I'm the caretaker? It was my parents' job to be the child, to be a little bit too in touch with emotion, to be a little bit too out there, and then I had to be the grounding anchor. I had to turn myself off in order to play parent and say, listen, it's okay. And there's an infinite amount of games you might learn to play with a parent, but, if that game is stopping you from becoming an adult, that's something that you want to look at because it's stopping your growth. So if you look at something like the Myers-Briggs, which is, based on Jungian typologies, if you look at those letters, there's always a corresponding opposite letter, and that's called your inferior type. So it's the stuff that you're kind of bad at. So like if I'm highly intuitive and I can just look at you and tell what you're thinking and kind of where you came from, and I can look at 4 or 5 different artworks and say, oh, well, there was a through line in society. Clearly here people were sort of questioning if the logical and concrete was a good idea, and then they rebelled against it. If you're in touch with all that idea-based stuff and you can do that easily, then your inferior type, you're going to be high N on the Myers-Briggs, right? You're going to be very intuitive and very empathic, but you're also going to be bad at the detail-oriented stuff that you feel like a robot or a computer can do. So you're not going to be good at, like sitting and adding things up. It doesn't mean you're not skilled at it. It means that it bothers you. There's something that's uncomfortable with it. You may say that you're not skilled at it. You probably have the intelligence to do it, but there's something about the way that your psyche is wired that's your inferior abilities, and it's trying to turn those off and move away from them. So in relationships, the way that comes out is that when we're out of touch with something, we try and find it externally. So like one classic example of this is that you have a person who's kind of like real free-spirited. Maybe they drink a little bit too much. They're a little bit too loud at the party. They call attention to themselves. They're so funny. And then you have somebody else who's very detail-oriented, rule-oriented. They don't like attention being called to them. They don't like it when their partner or anybody defies these social norms, and so they're saying like it's very uncomfortable for them. Yet they work and they're this great couple. And the reason that example is there is that both of those people need something from the other person. One is not okay with emotion, and then the other person is a little bit too in touch with emotion. One is not okay with sort of like rules and boundaries and barriers, and the other half of life. And this stuff is fine. I mean, can be a very healthy marriage. We all do this. I don't really think you can even turn it off necessarily. Where it's unhealthy is where you're trying to do someone else's journey for them. You're trying to do your journey through somebody else, and you're not doing your own work. That's where it's a problem, because ultimately you resent them for doing your journey poorly, because it's supposed to be yours. So, if somebody is going into a marriage like I just described, and they're saying, I'm uncomfortable with all this emotional feeling energy in myself and in other people in the world, I don't know what to do with that, so you just deal with that for me, and I'll go do the taxes. That's not healthy, because they need to be called to understand their own emotion and their own self and their own thoughts. That's their journey. Ultimately, around emotional issues, when their partner tries to help them through major life events like the death of a parent or something, they're going to resent them and be angry because they're not doing it right, because that person needs to figure out their own emotions. I mean, the same can also be true. The emotional person might be saying, like I'm not comfortable with any rules, any detail orientedness. So you wake me up and you set my alarm clock and you remind me not to go into credit card debt and you remind me how much stuff costs. And ultimately, even if somebody gives them a really good set of rules that's right to life, that's responsible, they're going to resent that if they don't come to that understanding of themselves, of I'm trying to escape from something I need to face. I'm afraid of this, but I need to face my fear. And all those letters on the Myers-Briggs do that. If you have marriage counseling people and you do marriage counseling, if somebody's super high in what they score on one letter, the person that they're married to will be an opposite. And even if they get out of that marriage, if it fails, they'll find another one if they're a super high end. And so a ton of therapy work is just getting people to be comfortable with their inferior skill set. That exterior type is what they call the main letters. A lot of times patients come in and they say, this is who I am, this is who I am, this is who I am. And it's fine to look at that and validate that and appreciate that, but you also need to be calling them back to get good at their inferior type and look at that. And not just for their own journey, but for their relationships. It's going to play a pattern in those relationships. So I hope that's helpful. If there's any questions, just let me know. And I hope you all have a good day. Good morning.